Studying the Mishnah in the name of Rabbi Tarfon, and Rabbi Tarfon was known in the Talmud, mentioned that he was extraordinary in the way in which he looked after his mother. He was a person who had tremendous kibbud aim, and I think the same could be said about Stephen Lawson and his mum. There's the also today for his mother, blessed memory, Sarah Bat Michael, and Stephen as an only child, and lived with his mum and looked after her, cared for her. And all the years after his father had passed away, he was an exceptional son. And you have a place in Gan Eden, Stephen, in the way in which you cared for your mom, together with her. So you're not free yet. Well, today's Mishnah begins Mishnah chapter 3 in Pirkei Avot. Mishnah 1 is in the name of a sage, Akavia ben Mahalel. Akavia ben Mahalel, a very unusual man. It's an unusual name as well. And I'll tell you an anecdote about his name in a moment. But the Mishnah describes in other places how incredibly pious he was, and also incredibly inflexible. And he differed from all of his colleagues on 4 particular points of law. So much so that he was invited probably after Shammai passed away. He was invited to take the place of Shammai, to become the Nasi, to become the head of the whole academy, etc. And he said he was, but it was only on the condition that he changed his view on these 4 laws and that he would conform to the other sages. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. Even if you call me a fool all of my days, I'd prefer not to be a wicked sinner even for one moment before the Almighty. And he said, in any event, he said, to change my views now, people will say, he changed his views in order to be able to acquire a higher position, to be able to become the Nasi, so he changed his view. He's flexible in his views. The reason why he didn't change his views was because he had a tradition from a number of scholars, and he considered them to be the majority against the others, and the law was always to go according to the majority. Subsequently, on his deathbed, he turned to his son and he said to him, you now relinquish all of the views that I've upheld on these 4 points. And his son protested. He said, but you didn't change your mind, so why are you asking me to change my mind? And his father said to him, he said, I learned my decisions from many masters, and my colleagues, learned their views from many masters, and therefore I stood strong and firm in my teachings, and they stood by theirs. But you have learned your views only from one person, from me. So therefore, you are now no longer the majority. Now you have to follow the majority because you're da'at yachid, you're only an individual. This, by the way, has an important consequence, because in the absence of a Sanhedrin, in the absence of any kind of body that is able to set the universal law, and you have fragmentation of views all over the place, ultimately, in particular matters that are contentious, one has to look at the overall consensus of the majority of the Rabbanim in the world, and you have to go according to the majority. That's all we have left today. We have Rov. And so long as that majority holds strong in a particular point, then one is obligated to follow that. And that has many applications in the circumstances of our modern lives. The story about Akavia ben Mahalel is that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, blessed memory, made a recce tour to America when he knew at an early stage that he was going to have to leave, just before the war broke out. He was going to have to leave Europe, and the question was where to be able to establish the movement. And he visited Israel and he visited America, and in the end he decided to set up in America famously, and he said at that time, because of Rov Minyan, of a Rov Binyan of Jews on America. He said the majority in numbers and in institutions at that stage. So the growth of Judaism and even the growth of Israel, he recognized would come from America. But anyway, during the time that he was in America, he gave a talk, and in this talk he referred to Akavia ben Mahalel, and he said the word Akavia is from the word akev, which means a heel, like the heel of the foot. The heel is the most insensitive part of the body because it's very coarse. You can stand on something sharp and not feel it because it has no sensitivity. He says even the heel of a person has to be mahalel, has to praise the Almighty. In other words, from the coarsest part of our existence, even that has to ultimately be permeated with and recognize the Almighty. At any rate, an American rabbi took great exception to this, and he said, he said, these Hasidic rabbis who come from Europe, they take a name, they take a Pirkei Avot, and they distort it completely. The man's name is Akavia ben Mahalel, and he started to tell you the piata, the heel of a Jew should be able to. So when this was reported to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he said, what can I do? He said, if the rabbi is an ignoramus and he doesn't know his midrash. Apparently, it's actually a midrash somewhere. The rabbi didn't know about it. He was quoting a midrash in this particular matter. Kavya ben Mahalel. Even the lowest part of a person has to be able to recognize the Almighty.